The last class we actually discussed on the basics of laser. Everything is there in your syllabus. It's not that these are excluded. Laser is basically a very basic syllabus that you have in your curriculum. So we will start with requisites of a laser system. Now we already know some technical terms. We already know about spontaneous emission, absorption, and so on. Okay, we are going to look into the mathematical derivation. But before that, if we actually want to make a laser system, what are the necessity? Okay, what are the requirements? There are basically three requirements. Okay, I think yesterday I did a bit of this, but anyway, let's just try to proceed with this only. Okay, we'll start with this related. We have the active medium. Okay, so you basically have in a helium neon laser, you've got a helium neon energy source. As I said, that it might be heat, it might be electricity, it might be a magnetic field, and so on, which will actually allow the atoms to jump from the lower energy level to the upper energy level. And then finally a resonant cavity consisting of two mirrors. So if we actually study a laser system, for example, let's say we study a system of ruby laser, we will basically know it in more detail. But anyway, we are not going to do that. Okay, so we'll go into what is exactly active medium. So when we consider something like an active medium, it is the one in which the population inversion and hence the lasing action can be achieved. So if you consider something like helium neon laser, there is always a question why there are two gases. It might be only helium or only neon. The thing is, if you have a combination of helium neon laser, the laser action takes place between that of the helium energy levels. Okay, so neon helium both are there where they are mixed so that they complement each other, and there is an existence of metastable state. Okay, these are more details. We are not really going into that right now. But then if you have that material medium where the population inversion happens, that means the medium in which, for example, here helium neon, we have the number of atoms in the upper energy level greater than the number of atoms in the lower energy level. That medium is called active medium. So it straight away points out that you cannot have every medium to be a laser source. Okay, so you cannot have it. So there are only specific items which can actually act as a laser source. So depending on the type of the active medium used, lasers are basically classified into four groups. So you have lasers, so you can have a solid material, you can have some gas, okay, you can have some liquid and so on. Based on these, we can actually divide lasers into four groups, and this is something which you are going to see now, which is actually important. Okay, so maybe I can take a highlighter. My system is hanging a bit today. Okay, so we have this first example is nothing but the gas laser. So as the name suggests, basically gas is nothing but the active medium. So one of the most common and widely used is something which is nothing but the CO2 laser. So in mechanical engineering, if you're doing it, you're basically using it later somewhere. Then you will see that for laser cutting and all, CO2 laser is used because these are very powerful lasers. And helium neon laser, you have already seen the application in the lab. So it basically consists a mixture of gases as the active medium. Having a single gas as an active medium sometimes doesn't give you the result that you want. Okay, so here also we have got carbon plus oxygen mixture. So all those mixtures are there which works. Then we have got something which is called the solid state laser. So obviously this material will be more or less solid in form, and they have got the energy levels efficient enough to form the metastable state and all. So it will basically consist of crystals. Okay, so you know crystals. Crystals are more difficult to derive. Okay, you need to purify it and so on. So it's not a very simple process. But in general, these are nothing but crystals which will actually act as the active medium. So for example, we have got something which is called ruby laser, which you might have studied, but we are not going to do it in this course. And then YAG laser is very common, yttrium, aluminum, garnet, YAG laser. And if I'm not wrong, this is the kind of material which is basically used in the lasers which are sold in market. Okay, like any street vendor or any shop, you take a laser pointer or something. These are basically nothing but YAG laser. Okay, I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing. I think it's correct. Then we have got something which we call as the semiconductor laser. All of you are efficient enough to understand what are semiconductor lasers. So here basically the laser action takes place between the valence band and the conduction band. So the working of these laser systems might be somehow different. Okay, they might not work the same way they used to work for gas laser. So semiconductor laser will be different where semiconductor is used as the active medium. So please remember, whenever you are considering any kind of active medium, the presence of two energy level is very important theoretically, but experimentally obviously there are more energy level. But when we consider semiconductors, you can actually consider the valence band and the conduction band, which is important. And then as you all know that gallium arsenide actually forms a very good laser, element belonging to the third and the fifth group of the periodic table. So it is basically considered as a laser system also. But gallium arsenide is also used in other applications, semiconductor applications. Okay. So what then finally we have got the liquid laser. So liquid laser, these are dye lasers, depend on what kind of material it is used, and the active medium will be in the liquid form. Okay. So they will basically consist of more or less the chemicals as the active medium. Okay. So this is a good question, maybe 2 marks question. What are the different types of laser depending on the active medium? Okay, so this is classified according to the active medium. There are other classifications which you are not going to look into, but depending on active medium, these are the 4 important classifications. This is widely accepted and this is very important as well. So let's just look into the second part of our laser system, which is the energy source. As soon as you think about energy, in general, you can think about electrical energy, magnetic energy, heat energy, and so on. Okay, so this energy actually helps in the process of something which we call as pumping. So when we have something like a pump, and you want to, let's say you want to drag water from the ground level to the top of your building in a tank, you basically use something which is called pumping. So here also it's the same thing. Probably the bottom of the ground will basically act as an uh, the state which is actually at rest, okay, at ground state, and then you can actually consider the top of your building as the excited state. So you are pumping it. So what do? You basically apply an external energy. So it might be you can switch on a motor using electrical energy, and then motor basically pumps it on top. So this is something which is pumping is all about. So it's very much the similar meaning, but please don't write down these kind of sentences in your exam. Okay, you should be technically correct. Okay, that's very important. What I said is not wrong, but that's not a very good way to write down the answers. Okay, because our system still accepts answers which is actually given by Chatur and not Ranjhor Das. Okay, if you watch Three Idiots. So let's stick to that. Okay, we cannot help it right now. So the process of exciting atoms from the lower energy state to a higher energy state by supplying energy from an external source. So what is this external source which is possible? So this is a definition of pumping. Okay, please keep a note of that. So what happens is the population inversion in the laser action is achieved by pumping the atom from the lower energy state. Okay, I don't think I have to explain this much. From the lower energy state by supplying energy from an external energy source. So this is what is done with pumping. Okay, let's not waste time. I think it's very simple. Okay, and then what kind of energy you can actually use, okay, will actually be a depending on that also we can actually categorize. Okay, so we have got something which is called optical pumping. So that means you can actually use optical energy. For example, I'll use visible light, or I'll use UV light, or I'll use IR radiation. They can actually trigger the atom to jump from the lower energy level to the upper energy level and then create a population inversion and a laser action. So this is called optical pumping, simple words. Electrical pumping, second one, where we use the electrical energy. These are the most common ones which are used. Okay, so let's not get confused. There are other forms of energy, but usually we use this. Then we've got heat pumping. So we'll basically heat the system and the thermal energy will basically work and then it will excite the atom. And then finally the chemical pumping. So chemical pumping is also important because there will be some kind of chemical reaction which actually pumps out. Okay, so these are the 4 most important types of pumping that are actually used for laser action, and the energy supplied is used not only for pumping but also for stimulated emission. So you might think that, okay, I'll apply the energy and that energy will be only used to excite the atom from the ground level to the upper energy level, but that might not be the case always. Sometimes that same energy can be used for even triggering the atom to come from the upper energy level to the ground energy level. So that means we are actually killing 2 birds with 1 stone, right? So this is something which happens. So it is all basically an integrated and optimum system where you can use the maximum use. Okay, and then finally we have got the setup where we have the resonant cavity. So an arrangement used in a laser device to increase the emitted photon density is called resonant cavity. It basically consists of 2 mirror. 99% part will actually give you the radiation coming out of it. Okay, so basically what happens, it will consist of 2 mirror. These are the highlighted words, important, fixed on either side of the length of the active medium. So that means within the mirror you will be actually having helium and neon gas trapped. Okay, so we have that, and one of the mirror is basically completely silvered and the other one will actually be slightly partially. Okay, so what happens when which one is completely silvered, it will actually only reflect. So whatever photons falls on it will basically get reflected, and the other one is actually partially silvered and it acts both as a reflector and exit for the laser beam. So it will reflect some part which will go and reflect the other mirror which is 100% silvered, and basically we are going to have a build of intensity, and then what happens is the 99% the 0.1% remaining space which allow the laser to actually come out. So if I ask you a question on principle of laser action, I don't think it's very difficult. Let me just tell you a brief on this. Okay, I have written the note, don't worry, but I'll tell you a brief on this. What is principle of laser action? You simply start with stimulated emission. Write down the full form and then say laser action happens because of stimulated emission, where an atom from the upper energy level will de-excite to the ground energy state, emitting a photon. Okay, and then that happens because an external photon is incident. That is there. And then you can say that what are the parts of the laser action. It will basically consist of three parts: the active medium, the energy source, of course, okay, and thirdly we have got the resonating cavity. So you can just write down these three. Okay, this could be one part of the question. Another question might be what are the parts of a laser system. So there you might be you should actually explain. Okay, like first if you write down the parts of action medium is active medium, just write down in one sentence of what is an active medium. So even if I give you 2 marks, better explain that in one sentence. Okay, what is an active medium, and please do justice to the marks, of course, this is very important. I'm telling you for the minimum. Secondly, energy source. Even if you don't mention what are the different types of energy source, at least mention what is pumping. I think that is very important. And third one, where we talk about resonant cavity, just talk about that it is an arrangement where the laser device is to use to increase the emitted photon energy density. Okay, because more the photon, more the energy, you are basically going to get a higher fast and very active and powerful laser. So that's very important. Okay, so having done with the theoretical part, this is the only mathematical part we are going to do for this particular course, and we are going to do two numericals based on this Einstein's A and B coefficient. So as you can see the name, okay, Einstein has contributed in more or less many fields in physics, and this is also one of the major contribution which still holds. So we are still studying this. Many of you might have studied a lot of things which becomes more and more redundant, but these things are more or less not redundant, they are fully proved. Okay, so before I start with Einstein's A and B coefficient, let me just give you some mathematical idea about absorption, stimulated emission and spontaneous emission. So absorption, as you know, you actually allow some external energy source to actually be incident on the system, which allows the atom to go from the ground state to the upper energy state. Okay, but then on what factor does it depend? Okay, it basically depends on a factor which is called the energy density. So that means the external source which is coming and hitting the atom, how much intense it is. Okay, that will actually be given by the idea of energy density. So this part is more or less, you can say, it's a probability. So the probability that an atom will jump from the lower energy level to the upper energy level is directly proportional to this particular energy density. That's quite obvious, right? It's logical. And then what happens is, if you remove this proportionality constant, we can write down this as B12 U nu. Please remember the notation and please don't mix it up in exam. If I see there is a mix up here, maybe I won't evaluate it further, because if you mix it up once, you get confused. Okay, and then probably you're not going to get the right answer. So B12 is basically nothing but called the constant of proportionality, and as we say Einstein's A and B coefficient, this is one of the B coefficient. Okay, so this is called Einstein's coefficient for induced absorption. What is the thing that you should remember is this part, energy density. It will depend on the energy density, and B12 is nothing but a constant. Mathematically this is totally right, just think about it. Okay, then we have got something which is called spontaneous emission. Now spontaneous emission is something which happens on its own. It doesn't depend on photon density. Whether there is a photon or not, it doesn't matter. If there is time and if the atom wants to come down to its ground state, it is not going to depend on any external source. It is directly going to come down. So basically it is directly proportional. Okay, so it's not proportional to energy photon density, but it definitely depends on a coefficient which is called the Einstein's A coefficient. There is only one. We write it down 2 1 because it comes from the upper energy level to the lower energy level. So we have got Einstein's coefficient for spontaneous emission. Okay, then finally we have got stimulated emission, and I think this will be clear to you. We use the term A and B. For A, see, we are using it spontaneously. That means there is no external source. But for B, we are using an external source. So B12 means there should be an energy incident on the system so that the atom jumps from the lower energy level to the upper energy level. Similarly, when we consider something like stimulated emission, here also the atom should jump from the upper energy level to an lower energy level only, not jump, rather it should relax only when there is an external source coming. So that is what is stimulated is all about. That's why I have taught you that topic separately. So this stimulated emission, that means again P21, that means from 2 to 1, I have written stimulated so that we don't get confused, is directly proportional to the energy density again. This energy density is nothing but the photon density of the external source. So please don't get confused here. It has nothing to do with the system that you're considering. It has to do with the energy that is incident on the system. So we have got P21, which is not nothing but the part of stimulated emission, and then we can replace the proportionality constant as B21. B21 you knew, where B21 is nothing but Einstein's coefficient for stimulated emission. Okay, so this is important. So when do you write down A? When it is spontaneous. When do you write down B? When there is an external source incident. Okay, please remember this mantra, I can say, okay, so that you don't get confused. Don't mix up A and B. I have seen it a lot of times. I think during my days of physics when I was studying, I also did the same. Okay, so let's try to be a bit confident about this. Okay, so then the next question is, does it depend only on the number of energy density, or it depends on any other factor also? Of course it depends on another factor. The most important factor is how many atoms are present in the ground state when there is an induced absorption, and of course how many atoms are present in the excited state. If there are more atoms, the chances of interaction will be more. Then the chances of atoms going from the ground state to the upper state, or going from the upper state to the lower energy state because of the stimulated emission will be more. So it depends on the number of atoms. So there is a term for this. I have written the entire sentence. The number of atoms absorbing photons per second per unit volume is actually given by B12 U nu N1, where N1 is, I think we have already come across this term, number of atoms present in the ground state. Okay, E1 state. Similarly, we can take N2 also. So if we just consider this, the number of atoms emitting photons per second per unit volume, emitting photons, okay, this was like going from the ground state to the upper energy state. We know it is nothing but 1 to 2, and if it is going from ground to state to the upper energy state because of an induced absorption, we should have U nu. Okay, and then we multiply with the number of atoms that are present in the ground state. Similarly, what happens when the atoms are coming from upper energy level to the lower energy level? Upper energy level to lower energy level, there can be two possibilities. One can be via spontaneous emission, and one can be via stimulated emission. In spontaneous emission, it does not depend on the photon density, so it is only A21, but definitely it will depend on how many atoms are present. And in stimulated emission, it depends on B21, that is nothing but the Einstein's coefficient. Of course, it depends on the energy density and the number of atoms in the upper energy level. So we have these things cleared. Okay, I have just tried to keep it as arranged as possible so that you don't get confused. Now what is the question? The thing is, there is a term which is called thermal equilibrium. So that means that the number of atoms getting excited from the lower energy level to the upper energy level will be equal to the number of atoms coming down from the upper energy level to the lower energy level. Okay, so if we do that, we can actually write down an equation. This is called the equilibrium state. Okay, so we basically have called something which is called as the thermal equilibrium at temperature T. Temperature is very important, because if you have a normal system at room temperature, it might not act like just like semiconductor always is more or less very resistant. But whenever you apply a temperature, the behavior changes. So temperature is an important factor. That is what is Boltzmann factor also says. So we basically have got the energy density U nu. So I have mentioned all the terms here, and let's say I have got N1 and N2, and these are nothing but the number of atoms in the energy states 1 and 2 respectively. I don't think you need to by heart these things, memorize these things, you already know it. Okay, but the only thing that you should know here is that for equilibrium condition, the number of atoms going from lower energy level to the upper energy level must be equal to the number of atoms going from upper energy level to the lower energy level. So from lower to upper, this is the term, this is something which we got in the previous slide. Okay, this is there, and from upper to lower, we basically can take N2 common. Okay, let's just go back, go back. Yeah, so we have got N2 here, we have got, sorry, this should be N2, this is not N1, I'm very sorry, this is N2. So this is N2, okay, that is also N2. So we can actually take out N2 common. You can point me out, okay, if I am wrong. So we can take N2 common, and then we have got A21 plus B21 U nu. So we can take that common, and then we can find out what is the energy density. So right now we are finding out the energy density. The question is why? Because we are going to compare it with Planck's law, okay? Because if you remember your Planck's law, basically it talks about energy density again for a perfectly black body, okay? The amount of energy emitted. So we are going to explain it in that term. But before that, we can write down the expression for energy density as U nu is equal to N2A21 divided by N1B12 minus N2B21. So I think maths is very simple. You can just do it, okay? In exam, please, if you want to write down extra 2-3 lines to derive it correctly, I think that is always advisable, okay? Don't try to by heart these things. Don't try to memorize. I think not a good idea. And then what we will do is we will divide throughout by B21. So we can divide A21 by B21. So we have got A21 by B21. Okay. So no problem. If I have made the mistake, I can correct it here. Might be all of us can remember it. So this is not there. No? This is not there. This is just 1. And then this is A21 divided by B21. And then we have already got an N1 here. So we can divide it by N2. And this will get divided by N2 B21. So we can just take it at the bottom and do it. Okay. So I think this should be more or less okay. Then we will go to the next slide, and then I think this one we actually already have done it before in the last class. We talked about Boltzmann distribution. So if you have atoms N1 and N2 at the two energy states E1 and E2, and they are in thermal equilibrium, we can actually know the ratio of N1 and N2 using the Boltzmann distribution law. So if you want to derive this law, you have to take help from statistical mechanics or statistical physics. We're not going to do that right now. But this is e to the power minus E1 by E2 divided by KT, or E divided into the power H nu divided by KT, because you know E2 minus E1 is nothing but H nu, the energy difference. Okay, so I can always reverse this, write down E2 minus E1, and the minus sign can come out, and then there will be plus, and write down E to the power H nu by KT. It's simple. So what we can do is we can substitute N1 by N2. So where was our N1 by N2? So you can see here we have got this N1 by N2. So we have got this N1 by N2. So we're just going to substitute here. Everything else remains the same, only this changes. So N1 by N2 will become e to the power H nu divided by KT. So this is done. We are actually having a relation for energy density in laser, and then what we are going to do is we are going to compare it with Planck's radiation law. So this is the equation that we have. This is just repeated. Okay, I've just written it twice so that we don't need to go back to the previous slide. Let's write down the Planck's radiation law. So what does Planck's radiation law states? It basically says that the spectral density of electromagnetic radiation, these are all electromagnetic radiation, right? There is an energy difference. Definitely it's going to come out and give out some kind of photon. These are nothing but electromagnetic radiation. If it is emitted by a black body, in general it is valid for other bodies also, okay? In thermal equilibrium, because we are using the term thermal equilibrium, so we can say it's thermal equilibrium at a given temperature T. So we have the temperature when there is no net flow of matter or energy between the body and its environment. Okay, so we can actually have a closed system and consider this. Please remember, the environment, the surrounding might be considered for considering a closed system. Okay, so don't go too much into this because I think this will be a more advanced part. But the thing here to remember is the Planck's radiation law, which also talks about the energy density. Planck's radiation law, the energy density relation is 8 pi h nu cube by c cube. There is definitely a derivation for this, but I hope you can actually remember this, okay? And then we can actually compare these terms, okay? We can compare these terms. What you can see is that B12 divided by this is this term. B12 divided by B21 is actually nothing but equal to 1. Why? Because there is already an e to the power h nu. If this becomes 1, this will be e to the power h nu minus 1. So this becomes e to the power h nu minus 1. Okay. Okay. And then this is nothing but A21 divided by B21 is nothing but here. We have it here. A21 divided by B21. And this will actually become 8 pi h nu cubed divided by c cubed. So this way what happens is we actually have the relation between B12 and B21. That means if you just cross multiply this, B12 is equal to B21. It simply means that the probability of having a induced absorption is equal to the probability of having a spontaneous stimulated absorption emission, okay, because this represents stimulated emission, this represents spontaneous induced absorption, so both of them are equal, okay. So the number of atoms that goes up is equal to the number of that atom that comes down if this is an induced process, and this ratio will actually be nothing but this particular term, okay. So please make sure you get this, okay, because in exam if they ask you numerical, this is more or less based on these formulas, okay, these two or three formulas, very important. So I'll just give you this final conclusion here, that what happens when B12 is equal to B21. It says that the probability of spontaneous emission is the same as that of the induced absorption, okay. So we are just going to go back, okay. I think it will be too big. Anyway, let's not repeat this. I think this is simple, okay. This explanation anyway, if you don't write this explanation is totally fine, okay, in general, but in general we should actually know, okay. So in general it means that, this is more important, the second para, that two processes will occur at equal rates. So if we say B12 is equal to B21, it means that it is occurring at equal rates, and then there is no population inversion that can be attained in a two-level system. So it also says that what goes up, if it comes down at the same time and they are equal, you cannot have a population inversion. You cannot have number of atoms more in the upper energy level compared to the lower energy level. So we have got A21 divided by B21 is 8 pi h nu cube by c cube. This basically says that the ratio of the spontaneous emission and the stimulated emission, okay, I think there is some mistake here. Yeah, this is not spontaneous, this is induced. I don't know why I made so many mistakes. Just wait. This is induced. This will be induced. But don't worry, I have prepared the notes for this. I'll give it to you. So this is induced. So this is induced emission, okay. Pardon my handwriting. Then this is there. And then this is proportional to nu cubed. See, this is proportional to nu cubed. So this is your nu cubed. So other quantities are constant here. A, pi, h, c, all are constant. It basically depends on the frequency. Quite logical. So this implies that the probability of spontaneous emission dominates over induced emission more and more as the energy difference between the two states increases. So you see, this is your spontaneous emission and this is your induced emission. So if you bring it here, you'll basically multiply it with a quantity which is the frequency. So frequency multiplied with the probability of induced emission is always lesser compared to spontaneous emission. So that means in general, in equilibrium state, you will have more spontaneous emission compared to induced emission. This is the general case, okay, and that is why Einstein's A and B coefficient is important to understand here, okay. So there are two numericals, but probably I'll stop here. Tomorrow we can actually just look into the numericals. By that time you can actually prepare your laser chapter. I think this will be more or less it, okay. Two numericals we are going to look into tomorrow, and we are going to understand it better, okay. Because tomorrow I'll probably take the numerical and we will start with lasers. So it's Wednesday, we have got Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So by Saturday we should be starting off with the 5th unit, okay. So more or less I think we are on time. So even if it's a 2 classes session, we really don't need 2 sessions. I think 1 session is more or less okay to finish our syllabus, okay. So we'll stop here for today.